Welcome to the Scale with Stride podcast, the place where you come to listen to some of the world's most influential leaders of the SaaS industry. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, and today I'm pleased to introduce you to Yotam Yemini, who shares his 15 plus years experience of software sales, working for companies such as Ort, Tinybird, Quantum Metrics, and Turbonomic. Yotam has contributed to generating over 100 million in revenue and 4 billion in company valuations. Some of the key takeaways from today's conversation: what he believes makes a great salesperson, how his basketball coaching career set him up for success as a sales leader, his philosophies around hiring great salespeople, and his top tips for turning around underperforming sales teams. I always enjoy my time with Yotam. I had a great time recording this. Let's dive in. Yotam, thank you very much for joining us on the Scale with Stride podcast. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. You've done a lot for us over the last few years, whether it's hosting events in San Francisco for some of our VCs or today helping us record the podcast. So I really appreciate you giving up your time. I suppose, for the listeners' benefit, it'd be great to kick things off, I suppose, by just introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for having me. So a bit about myself. So I live in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Obviously, I don't sound Israeli, but I have a name that sort of outs me. So I was born in Israel, but raised in the U.S. And I guess maybe as a little bit of a fun fact about my background, I used to be a college basketball coach before I transitioned into tech sales about 15 years ago. And then in terms of just career-wise, I've been a part of, in terms of as a full-time employee, 4 different startups that I've been really fortunate to learn a lot of things and accomplish a few notable things at. And I've also been an advisor to at least a few startups, a couple of which have been acquired. And I just do a very, very tiny bit of angel investing, now that I'm getting gray-haired and a little bit older.
I think you've played it down a little bit there, Yotam. So 100 million in revenue you've contributed towards, and over 4 billion in valuation, that in terms of value that you've created. So I think, you've maybe played it down a little bit there. But obviously doing my homework, I noticed the background in sports coaching within basketball. And again, I think you may be being a bit too humble. So I understand you coached the NCAA D1 college basketball team.
I did. So I was an assistant coach for 1 year at Chicago State University, and then 2 years back in my alma mater at Tulane University. Obviously, a very different life from the life I live now, but also really interesting, parallels and points that connect one experience to the other.
I think that there's a lot we could talk about with sports and sales, and then also like coaching and leadership. So I think we'll probably dig into that in a little bit more detail. And I suppose just to sort of put us in the picture, where you're at the moment, what you're currently doing. I know you've been over at Ort as CRO, and you're obviously advising a few other companies. But tell us a little bit about what's keeping you busy at the minute.
Yeah, so I joined Ort back in 2020 after spending a few years at a company called Quantum Metrics, which is in the Insight Ventures portfolio. And when I first met Matt at Ort, it was super early. The first line of code hadn't been written yet for the product that we ended up bringing to market. I ended up leaving Ort a little after a year, and about a year after having left Ort, Matt convinced me to come back and help with something that we had to be a little bit quiet about for a while. It's actually one of the reasons I postponed our recording the first time, because I didn't want to have to hide what I was talking about. But about 2 weeks ago now, maybe 3 weeks ago, Cisco announced that it's acquiring Ort. And so that was one of the initiatives that I came back to help Matt with, was around M&A for the company. And super excited for him and for the rest of the employees. And really the plan is to hopefully use the resources at our disposal at Cisco to bring his vision for Ort to life.
So what's that? Is that your third acquisition under your belt now? Third big high profile?
So, well, it depends how you want to count them. But so Turbonomic, I was employee 10, ended up getting acquired by IBM for 2 billion, and I spent 7 years at Turbonomic. So that was really the first one and the big one. And then I was an advisor at OpsGenie, which was bought by Atlassian. I was an advisor at Granulate, which was bought by Intel, and now Ort, which has been acquired, or it hasn't closed yet. It'll close at the end of the month, but the announcement has come that Cisco's acquiring Ort. So it's been fun. Ort is the first one that I'm truly involved in the actual M&A process itself. That's been a step in my career that I'm glad I came back to help with this.
Good stuff. Well, I suppose congratulations, and on to the next phase of your journey. So I think I want to sort of start at the beginning, really. So you were coaching basketball. You see a lot of people moving from sports into sales. I think one of your good pals, is it J.R. Butler? That's like a big thing that he's into. I want to ask you then, like, why did you make the step into sales?
So I was having a beer with my brother in New York City. This is maybe May of 2010. I think it's got to be the year. And so we had just gotten fired or resigned at Tulane University. The way that it works in college basketball is, you pretty much go with the head coach. So if the head coach resigns or gets fired, you're pretty much out too. Anyway, long story short, I ended up at this bar with my brother, my older brother, having a beer, or as you guys like to say, a pint, having a pint, and
Yeah.
asking him for some advice. And just for context, my brother, he has an MBA, and he had been a consultant for a number of years. And I don't know if it was just, to appease him, or because, I genuinely do look up to my older brother. He had asked me what I was thinking about doing next, because I was not going to keep chasing the next college job. I got some NBA interviews, but I didn't get any of those jobs with the Knicks, the Nets, and the front office. And and I was just looking for some advice. And he said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, I think I'll either go to business school to get my MBA, or maybe I'll get into consulting." And he drinks the rest of his beer, and he slams his beer down, his mug down. And he's like, "Those are two terrible ideas. Don't do either of them." Which is ironic, since that's, of course, his path. And anyway, long story short, as we sort of got under the covers of why was I excited to be in basketball and coaching, and what did I want to do with my life when I thought I wanted to be a basketball coach forever, we started to draw the parallel in the business world towards being the CEO of a company. And as we talked further about how do you become a CEO of a company, one of the points of advice that my brother gave me was kind of have two paths. Either you're building the thing or you're selling the thing. And uh, anyway, long story short, the whole discussion was about how really my attributes were much more attuned towards being the person who is selling the thing than being the person who is building the thing. Um, and his advice kind of carried me forward into this opportunity that ended up being Turbonomic, or what was at the time called VM Turbo, because he had suggested that the best way to get really broad career experience that I was looking for was to go to a startup. He explained there's really no job harder out there that you can have than trying to help sell a thing that nobody's ever bought before. And if you can do that, every other job you'll have after that is going to seem like a walk in the park compared to that. And
Was he
some
right?
truth, also some not so correct feedback there. But anyway, regardless, that's a long story about how did I end up in tech sales.
Nice. Okay, so you can partly thank your brother for necking his pint and telling you not to go down the academic or consultancy and get stuck into what has proven to be some really sound advice.
Yes, 100%.
I suppose in terms of that, like, first step up into leadership, then you've drawn on a lot of experience from your coaching side. It seems like managing the same kind of individuals in terms of where the stage they are in their life, but from a sporting background, but more into a professional world. And so that makes a lot of sense. So what what else was behind the career trajectory that you had, though? Because I think if I look at the time you spent there, managing a team within 7 months, promotion, then next thing you take a big step up into a regional VP role, then vice president of sales within 7 years, which is like a lot faster than most. What's been your secret sauce? Like, why have you done so well?
Yeah. So look, first of all, I think anybody who's got that type of a trajectory I'd be remiss to not say part of it is I was fortunate to be in a company that was doing well and growing really fast. And, among the many things that I'll never forget having been taught by a guy by the name of Ben Nye, who was the CEO of Turbonomic for a long time, is that doors open for high performers on winning team. And so when you're a high performer and you're part of a winning team, new doors are going to open for you. And I think a lot of it was that. I think just for me, attributes as a leader that I value are being willing to model the behavior that I expect out of people, uh, never expecting something more out of somebody else than I expect out of myself, and demonstrate to others out of myself. um, and I'm always continuously learning and trying to get better at my craft. There's I forget the name of the book, so I'm sorry that I can't reference it right now, but I try to get 1% better every single day.
Marginal
As
gains.
yeah, and so I just think there's some attributes about that in some ways might be unique to me, but are also in other ways not that unique to me. Like there's no secret sauce of something that I did that somebody else can't do. I think some of it is right guy in the right situation at the right time. And yeah, I got the founders award at Turbonomic, which became kind of a big deal over the years after having been there for 5 or 6 years. And I remember Shmuel Klieger, who's the founder, standing on stage and telling the audience about why he was giving me this founders award. And he had talked about the fact that from the moment he met me, I walked through the first door that opened and then I just never looked back. And I think like that impatience to just continue to push to the next, like realizing there's always a next level to get to, it's been both, in some ways I've made some mistakes in my career, but also it's really served me well to never be satisfied and always sort of push for what's next.
Yeah. And how much of like the environment like contributed towards that? Because I think, with salespeople, they are goal orientated, but some environments don't really like foster that. I think one of the things that, we try and do at Strive is give people a really clear line of sight. It's like, if you do X, you will achieve Y. And if you do Y, you'll progress on to, so on and so forth. Like, was that kind of environment created there as well, or was it just through were you forced in situations yourself, or was it the right environment that's just basically giving you the best opportunity?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I really do believe I worked for some of the best leaders I'll probably ever meet in my life at Turbonomic. So I really was fortunate to be exposed to some of them. And again, everybody has their flaws, right? But there are attributes about each of those leaders that I really value. And I think one of those is the fact that it didn't matter who you were in the organization. If you saw something, you could speak up about it and get very direct and honest answers about the situation. And of course, there's always going to be exceptions, especially as companies grow. But for the most part, I found that that was an environment that was created that I got to be a part of, where you were measured by your numbers. It was very much a meritocracy. And also, you were free to speak your mind. And you might not like what you hear back, but it's going to be the, and I think some people do well in those environments. I'm one of those people. A lot of people struggled in that environment. Doesn't make them any worse people. It's just that people react differently in different situations.
Yeah. Okay. And so I suppose I want to move on to like your experience of like building companies. You've been in a number of startups. You've been through like as early stages. You've gone through from zero to one motions. What are the kind of things that you look for when you are looking for your next gig, when you're looking for a new opportunity, or you're about to take a new CRO role on? Like, what are the things that you're looking for in companies before you make the jump?
Yeah. So I think there's three key things, and then maybe I'll add a fourth, which might be an extension of the three. So the first is, especially when you're on the sales side, but I think this is true of any role, is you really have to be genuinely enthusiastic and interested in the market that you're going to spend your time in. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have passion yet, but you have curiosity. So if you think about it as, you interview with this company and you're not genuinely curious to go the next three levels deeper to really better understand the customer and the space and the solutions and the market. It's like, to me, that's the first sort of X and get out of there. So you got to be really curious and interested in that potential market. The second thing is the team, which is really, I think as you move forward in your career, you get the opportunity to be a bit more choosy about what team you choose to work with. And and also you get better at figuring out what type of a team dynamic do you want to be in, right? Like you don't, it's hard to know what type of people you're trying to steer clear from until you've been exposed to some of those people.
Yeah.
you know,
Sometimes you got to kiss a few frogs, though, haven't you?
yeah, yeah. So you find sort of the situation that gives you energy, the people that give you energy, and that's what you kind of look for, right? And then the third thing is the role, and I think about the role. I think you can look at this in two ways. Part of it is how do you sell yourself for a role, and then part of it is what do you look for in a role. And so, I think my advice has always been when people have asked for it about career changes is that you want to find something about that next role that you say, you know what, I'm one of the best people I know in the world at doing this part of this job, right? So if you're interviewing for a potential role, you want to understand what problem are they trying to solve by hiring you. And if you're not one of the best people that you know in your network at solving that problem, you probably don't want to be taking that job. Okay. There's some amount of differentiated value that you want to bring in order to be able to make the impact that you want to be able to make. Now, by the same token, there should be some part of that job that really, I'll watch my language on this one, but scares you, scares you out of your pants or whatever you want to, whatever, you want to say. So there should be some part of that job that you say, that's really going to challenge me to do something differently, something I haven't had to do before. And I think that's part of what makes the job interesting too, right? Is feeling like you're building your next set of skills. And so I think to me, it's like those things: the market, sort of being interested in that market and curious about it, the team and feeling like it's really a team you want to go to battle with every single day, and then the role in terms of something you can do with your eyes closed. Some part of the role you can do with your eyes closed, but then some part of the role it's going to stretch you to do something you haven't had to do.
Yeah, and I think like it sort of nicely sort of segues into that. You mentioned about the team. So I spend a lot of my time sort of speaking to people like yourself on both sides of the fence, whether we're hiring for you or whether you're looking for a new role. And one of the bits of advice that I always give is no matter how high up you get within the sales org or within a business, you should always like make sure you pick your boss. And in terms of like leadership, you've been, in basketball, you've been coaching, you're a leader, you're setting the pace, you're setting the expectations and the standards. And then you've obviously translated that into a business world. One of the things I wanted to talk to you was about like your leadership style, and like how your leadership style has enabled you to be successful in your career. What is it that's been so unique about your leadership style? I know you talk about leading from the front, never expecting people to do something that you're not prepared to do yourself, and also like development. But from a like, if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm trying to get something actionable from that I can take away from it, what advice would you be giving to other leaders, or that can learn from your story?
I mean, this might sound really basic, but I think it's just really important to be true to yourself and genuine. And I find that there's really maybe two things. One is that one is about being genuine, and
Yeah, being
then
authentic is important. Yeah,
sticking to the basics. I find I was just on the phone an hour ago with the head of sales at a company that just raised their Series B from OpenView. I have no interest in the company other than just helping out this person that he keeps asking me what he did right. That I'll I'll just share my free time with him for no compensation, and I just tell him like, look, I don't mind helping
yeah,
people who are coachable, and I give him the same advice, which is you have to be authentically you, and if there's not something about the authentic you that just inherently has leadership qualities, you're going to struggle to be a leader. Like I do think it's one of those things that you as a person exhibit leadership qualities where people want to be led by you, want to follow your lead, or you don't. and again, maybe I'm giving you a cop-out answer. This is just what I believe. And then I think part of that is then also just sticking to the basics. And what does sticking to the basics mean in a leadership sense? It means that people want a leader who is clear in terms of what they expect, is consistent in what they expect, and who genuinely cares. And I didn't mean to make it like the three C's, but we can call it the three C's just by accident. You know,
Well, there's
being
a
clear.
saying, isn't there? People don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and so I just think genuinely caring about people, genuinely being clear about what you're expecting, and genuinely being consistent in how you work with other people. Like that sounds so basic, but so many leaders just don't do those three things. And I think if you do those three things and it's intuitive and natural to you, I think you'll be a good leader.
Yeah. And one of the things I think one of the mistakes that happens quite a lot in sales is, top performers by default often get promoted into positions of leadership when sometimes the top performing AEs, for example, aren't always the best leaders. They can be quite selfish, and making that transition from being selfishly productive as an AE into being selflessly productive as a leader can often go one of two ways. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about around leadership, and you mentioned about being authentic, but the difference between like innate leadership and like learned leadership. So some people just have those natural characteristics, but then you have others that maybe don't possess those kind of the charisma, the charm, the gravitas that pulls people in and wants people to sort of get behind the mission for them. But what's been your view on like learned leadership and how that can be like developed as a skill?
Sorry, it's stuck in my head. This thing you were just talking about reps getting promoted into manager roles. So we're going to have to come back to that too.
Well, go for
because
it, and then I'll ask the question again if you want.
I have a very strong opinion about that one that we can come back to, and it might be a slightly contrarian opinion. But on the learned leadership, I mean, look, going back to what I said earlier about trying to get 1% better every single day, I'm a better leader today than I was a year ago. I hopefully will be a better leader a year from now than I am today. So yeah, I think there's some amount of learned leadership that somebody can do, but I still think it has to be innate. And in terms of maybe the thing that has to be innate is your interest, your passion for it. I think like for me, I'll never forget that sort of moment for me in my career of like, do you want to be a rep or do you want to be a leader? And the best way that somebody coached me on getting to the answer to that question was about what gives you energy. When you think about your day to day, you break it down into its smallest parts about the tasks you do throughout a day to try to figure out, are those individual tasks that give you the most reward, or are they tasks where you are helping somebody else accomplish a thing, or where you are helping connect multiple people together to solve a thing? If those are the things that really give you energy, then that kind of gives you your answer that, hey, maybe leadership is for me. And then, how to become a leader just starts with, live the examples of what you've seen that you think good leadership looks like, and you're going to make 1,000 mistakes along the way, and you just have to be self-aware enough to the fact that you're not going to be a great leader in your first leadership role. I made more mistakes than we have time in a podcast to talk about, and I continue to make mistakes, but I'd like to think I don't make the same ones over and over again. I think I'm making new ones. So hopefully this is addressing what you were asking about, but anyway, that's it.
No, it does. And now I'm curious. So, what are your views on top performers going into leadership, and who are you throwing under the bus here?
No, it's a different. I think that it's become such popular wisdom now that is passed around about, oh, don't hire that top performer into a leadership role because they're going to fail. That it's now, unfortunately, I think doing the opposite. I think there are far too many top performers who really would be good leaders and aspire to lead that aren't being given those opportunities because everybody's just sort of following the conventional wisdom now. And and so anyway, that's why I wanted to say something.
Fair enough. I'll be honest, Yotam, I thought it was going to be a bit juicier than that. Well, talking about like continuing the leadership theme, then you know, is I often find like storytelling is a great way for to sort of illustrate, examples of where you've been a great leader. Is there anyone in particular, success stories or like moments in your career which have been really really defining from a leadership perspective, or things that you've been really proud of as a leader?
I mean, I think generally speaking, I've got somewhere between half a dozen to maybe a dozen people who I've directly managed or mentored or led that are now running significant organizations, either as the heads of sales or, even you mentioned J.R. Butler earlier. J.R. worked on my team for a little bit at Turbonomic. And I think just in general, in totality, those are the things that I think about when I'm asked about like those types of questions are the people who now I see leading and doing a great job of leading their respective organizations. I think that's, at least in my mental model of a good leader, that's part of what good leadership looks like, is that good leaders foster other leaders. Bad leaders foster followers. And unfortunately, I've seen some of that in my career too. But I don't know if I'm answering your question. I hope I am.
Yeah, no, it's similar for myself. When you look at people that have been on the journey with you over the years, and where they started and where they are now. There's one that springs to mind for me. He started as like a 16-year-old apprentice, had to get a letter off his mum just to allow us to take him out for a meal on a Friday for like a lunch club. Fast forward 10 years later, he's now set up his own recruitment company and absolutely flying. So it's stories like that which
Yeah, no,
make being in that leadership role
and look, we
rewarding.
can, yeah, I mean, we could talk about those forever. I mean, there's a woman who was a rep on one of my teams at Turbonomic who I think she was just getting out of a role in accounting, and it was actually my manager, who at that time was our SVP of sales, who convinced her to get out of an accounting role and to try out sales as a career. Now she's got her two houses, her boat. She's she's living a very different life than the entry level SDR job that she signed up for back when she started. And you just look at people like that, or there's another guy who I just recently reconnected with who was a BDR at Turbonomic. Again, so many of these Turbonomic stories are worth reflecting on because now so much time has passed, right? So you see where those people are now in their career, and he's now running a pretty big team at Zscaler, and we were just two BDRs in a little office in Westchester, New York, and now so many years later, reconnecting, and he's running a big team at Zscaler. I think, by the way, that's the. I know this might be a bit of a tangent, but to me, that's one of the most exciting things about going to a startup is that opportunity for that startup to become a big, notable, memorable company like Turbonomic became. And it's not about that; it's about then so many years down the line, seeing where these people ended up, and now reconnecting with them and seeing what they're doing. And anyway, like I said, it's a bit of a tangent.
We've painted like quite a clear picture in terms of yourself, your background, and where you are today. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is, if I'm a sales leader listening to this podcast now, is like some real like actionable takeaways of some of the lessons that you've learned over the years, initiatives that you've run, and stuff like that. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, as a CRO, you've got a huge amount of responsibility within an organization, and in particular the success of the business. No matter how good the product is, if you haven't got a really well running sales function, no one's going to know about it and no one's going to buy it. So sales itself is fundamental. One of the things I'd be keen to learn is, throughout your career, like, can you tell me about some of the initiatives that you've ran as a sales leader, whether that's first, second, third line, wherever it might be, that's really helped move the needle in a company's growth?
Well, I think one of the I'll give you like a mental model, then I'll give it to you as a specific story about how this played out. Um, there's a guy by the name of Mickey Arabelovich. He runs a venture firm called Telescope, I believe it's called. He used to be at Sequoia, and he's the guy that taught me this model of the four wheels of the car. And the point of the four wheels of the car is you have the product wheel of your car, which decides for whom is our product solving which problem. That wheel feeds the marketing wheel of the car, which then goes and tells the world about for whom we've built this product, which solves which problems. And then you've got the sales wheel of the car, which then needs to take that message that marketing has crafted based on what the product wheel did for the car. And the sales wheel of the car has to go bring that message into the world and find the people that have that problem that marketing just told the world that the product team built a solution for. Right. And then you've got the fourth wheel of the car, which is all about the success of the customer once the sales team has successfully converted that customer to become a believer or a paying customer. And so those four wheels of the car have to come together for any startup to be successful long term. And the story that I was just thinking about is that Quantometric, uh, one of the challenges that we had early on was that certain people really got it when they saw the product, and other people just really didn't. And we went on. Actually, the coincidence, or maybe not so much in the story, is the CEO of Quantometric, Mario, and myself met with Mickey, who I just told you about, those wheels of the car, and we went on a cross functional initiative to make sure that the product, from a user interface and user experience perspective, was guiding the customer to use the product the way that we thought would solve their problems. We rebranded our entire company, and if you want to, use the term of defining a category, came up with this phrase around continuous product design, which was really, are you familiar with, in DevOps, there's this sort of like infinite loop. Have you ever seen this image? It's like a DevOps loop of all the things that happen in testing your
Okay.
code, launching your code. It's
Like
about release.
continuous integration and continuous deployment.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a little infinity loop about that. And so we came out with our version of that for continuous product design. Um, but before we came out with that branding and that positioning around continuous product design, it first started in the product itself. It then went into the marketing message and the story that we were going to go tell. Then it crossed over into sales enablement and making sure that from a sales perspective, we understood how to tell that story and how to also qualify which customers had the pain that this product was solving for them versus which were just looking for, a solution that did a sliver of what we were really selling. Because those that were just looking for a sliver of what we were selling were going to be the opportunities we either ended up losing, or we'd have to discount heavily in order to try to win, which weren't really worth chasing. Right. And then that all, of course, translated back into the customer success wheel of having a playbook for how do we get the customer from signed order to value achieved as soon as possible, so that we could either ask for a reference or look for what's the next expansion opportunity in the account. And so hopefully that's a decent example in terms of sort of a mental model and a story.
Yeah, what I'd say from that is basically aligning all the different departments so they all understand each other, they understand the role that they play, and they're all communicating like effectively, basically.
Regardless of what your remit is as the CRO, the bottom line is you have to be able to go outside of your sales box and be thinking about product and be thinking about marketing and be thinking about customer success. Maybe that is one of the true distinctions between a CRO versus a VP of sales.
Okay, and I suppose like that's like a great initiative for someone at that CRO level, where you're thinking, right, are all the different business units, are we all working in uniform? Do we all understand each other? Can you think of any other initiatives, maybe like earlier on in your career, from a purely sales perspective, purely man or woman management? Any like initiatives that you've run to really help move the needle from a sales perspective?
I think we're in a time when pipeline building has probably never been harder for people. People that are working in roles where they are responsible for building pipeline probably can't remember a time when it's been any harder than it is right now.
Yeah,
And
no one
so
answers the phone anymore.
yeah, well, actually, some people still do. I mean, I will tell you that most of the pipeline that I've seen built over the last year and a half, has been a function of having a well qualified person pick up the phone and call the right person in a company. And that's back to the everybody makes calls. Myself picking up the phone to call somebody who we really want to meet with. Still works. It works more than email. Let me put it that way. I think phone
Yeah,
works more than email.
no, it
Um,
does.
and the other way, just to finish out the thought about pipeline building, is trade shows and networks and warm referrals still work really really well. But anyway, but the anecdote here about getting to the eventual point that you were asking about, something tangible from early in the career that leaders can apply, uh, is the idea of having not just a pipeline gen day, but making pipeline generation part of what you do every single week and report out on every single week, and that you're trying something new around pipeline generation every single week. In my last role, Tiny Bird, we created these little sort of sales playbooks. They're one-page Google Docs, and it was a collaboration between myself and the CEO and the head of marketing. And we're writing down in that Google Doc, here's a very specific persona we're going after. Here is a very specific message for that persona that we're going to go after. And we actually crowdsourced it with the sales reps to come up with the goal of what are we trying to achieve and how are we actually doing against those goals. And so we didn't make it a tops down, we're looking at your dials every single day. We made it much more of a bottoms up of asking the sales reps for them to pick the goals and for them to tell us, here's what's working and here's what we're going to try next. And the part that we were filling in as the management team, as the CEO, as myself, and as the marketing leader, was we were just helping them with the content, with the ideas. They said, hey, look, we really think we want to go after this X group. Help us make sure that we're on point with how we're thinking about this experiment, this hypothesis. I think the more you can make pipeline generation everybody's problem and get everybody willing to make the calls and everybody willing to participate, uh, the better off you're going to do at driving true energy around it. And again, I think the results speak for themselves because if you ask the founder about pipeline generation, one of the common things you're going to hear from them is, oh, well, I never had problems getting meetings. I don't know why my reps do. Well, part of the answer is because you have the founder advantage. On your LinkedIn,
Yeah.
it says founder. So instead of complaining about your reps, why not help your reps? Why not work with them on how to unstick a stuck pipeline? And so I don't know how. Hopefully, that is a helpful anecdote for the
So
listeners
like,
out.
yeah, what I take from that is like getting everyone involved and having a sense of ownership over what they're doing, which then creates the accountability and the engagement in whatever activity it is. And then another thing that I took from that is around like experiment. So let people have a bit of creative license to get their own results.
Yeah, 100%.
How much has hiring had a big impact on your, I suppose, your success, like hiring the right people? And it'd be good to talk about your philosophy around hiring.
Yeah, yeah. So I was on the phone with the founder yesterday talking about this. She's had a couple strikeouts with first sales hires, and she's trying to figure out what to do differently. And so, yeah, I mean, I think just like back in the basketball world, you're only as good as the players on your team. You're only as good as the worst player on the bench, or what have you. So, yeah, I mean, hiring is critical. I think in terms of anecdotes, you know, I think you want to be able to find, just like when we talked earlier about career searching, you want to find that transferable thing in a candidate that you say, hey, because in their body of work, I see that they did X. It's very, very clear how what they did in that role is going to translate into this role. Uh, one of the people who I now count more as a friend than anything else, but we got to knowing each other because he was one of my customers early on in my career, and I ended up having the chance to invest in one of his companies. As the CEO of this company, Mabel, Izzy Azari, and uh, and Izzy once gave me some career advice to say, uh, don't ever make two hops in your career. One hop is okay, meaning um, you're going to sell something new you've never sold before, but you're going to be in the same role. That's okay. But you're going to sell something new you've never sold before, and you're going to be in a different sales leadership role. Stay away from that. That's two hops. Don't do it. Don't do the two hops. And I think the same can go for how do you interview candidates, right? If you got to make one hop, right? Like, okay, they already know this persona that we're selling to. but this is a different type of ACV. They haven't had to do deals of this size. They can probably make that hop. But if it's a persona they haven't sold to before and different ACVs, that's probably too much of a hop to make. On the flip side, somebody who has sold lots of enterprise contracts, but maybe they haven't had to sell to this persona before. If that's what you're asking them to do, they might be able to make that one hop. Because you know what? Once upon a time when they were at their previous company, they didn't know how to sell to that previous persona either,
Yeah.
right? So I think
So
that's a
try to
lot of
limit the points of failure when you're hiring someone.
yeah, and I think everybody's got their own sort of list of things that they're looking for. I try to keep it really simple. The two A's, attitude and aptitude. Uh, Under the attitude umbrella and under the aptitude umbrella, there's ways to ask questions to look for, does this person have uh, the capacity to learn how to win in a new environment? Because by definition, I've only ever done startup build outs for sales teams. So by definition, there's going to be something about this environment that's not transferable from their last company or their last role or whatever they were doing previously. So, does this person have the aptitude to learn a new thing and thrive in a new environment? And also, do they have the attitude, sort of the want to, the chip on their shoulder that's driving them to deal with the hard things because things will get hard.
And I suppose to peel back the onion a little bit more on that, like attitude and aptitude is something that it resonates with me. It's something that's familiar, and I suppose it's been thrown around in the recruitment world as well. But I suppose from your perspective, then when you are hiring, you're looking for the two A's, but like what else are you looking for? What is it you think that makes a great salesperson?
So, I think when you break down the details of a specific deal with a salesperson, there's the basics that you're looking for there about, can they articulate what made this a well qualified customer? Can they articulate the sales process? And maybe more importantly, can they articulate the sales process, but from the buyer's perspective, right? What was actually the customer's buying process? And what did the salesperson do throughout that buying process to help the customer through their buying journey? Right. So to me, that is a big part of what I'm trying to understand. And again, what I'm trying to translate is what they've experienced in that previous environment and how might that translate to our environment. That's a part of it. Part of what I'm looking for is, do they take accountability for building pipeline? And can they articulate to me what their plan is going to be for how they're going to do it here? And they're going to get some things wrong of the assumptions they make in that answer. But are they getting enough right that you're saying, okay, yeah, I can see it, right? I can see how they're going to be successful here. So I think those are some of the things that I'm asking about. Some of the things that I'm asking about on the attitude side are just as simple as, what do you want out of this opportunity? And you really got to ask multiple follow-up questions to whatever answer you hear, to really try to, like you said, peel back the layers of the onion to really figure out, like, does this person really know why they want to work here, or are they just looking for a job? And of course, they're on the phone with you because they're looking for a job, but is there something more to it? And if they don't know yet what more to it is driving them into that job, then you have to decide, do you want to go on that journey with them to help them on that discovery of why they're going to run through the brick wall that inevitably hits them on day 90 or day 180, or are they just going to run in another direction when they hit that wall? So that's a lot of the attitude stuff. And I think the other piece on the attitude stuff is, when you talk about deals that they've won and when you talk about deals that they've lost, I try to pay particular attention to how they talk about the people around them and how those people helped, or what those people did that contributed to the success or contributed to the failure. An old coachism, Dave Dickerson, who was my coach at Tulane University, taught me this one is, the wins are the players and the losses are mine. The wins are for the players, the losses are for me. And I try to, there's an interesting balance there with salespeople, because I do think some of the best salespeople may not appreciate me calling them arrogant, but I mean it as a compliment, you know? So some of the best salespeople do have a little bit of a an inflated sense of self worth and self importance. Um, the truly best are self aware enough to understand their ego and how to channel their ego. And I think in that same vein, the best salespeople that I've had the pleasure of working with in my career, and really any operator in any function, they have that self awareness to understand the role that they are required to play, and they provide compliments glowingly to their teammates around them, and realize that the wins are, it's for the players. The wins are for everybody else, and they take accountability, for the losses, and they really point the finger at themselves first and foremost about what they need to do better or what they learned from that failure.
Yeah. And I suppose, we've talked about hiring there. One of the things that's really relevant at the minute is I suppose like performance. Um, According to RepView, so 37.2% of sales reps hit quota over the last 12 months, which is quite a staggering like statistic when you think that's at enterprise level AEs. 37.2% of reps are hitting their number. It's like huge underperformance within the market. There's a lot of CROs, a lot of VPs sat there scratching their heads thinking, how do I turn this around? How do I get performance out of my team? What can you think about times in your career where you've had, the bad quarters, or you've had underperforming teams or individuals, and what you've done to turn those things around?
100%. Yeah. I think anybody that's been successful, they tell you they never had a bad quarter. They're just not back to self awareness. They're missing that self awareness piece.
Yeah,
Um,
they didn't try hard enough.
yeah, yeah. Just repeat something I said earlier. I hope not to disappoint you or anybody else, but it's back to the basics. I think anytime that you're in a period of underperformance, you got to just go back to the basics. Am I doing the right amount of PG, of pipeline generating activity? Is it working for me? Right? If it's not working for you, the fact that you're doing it is meaningless. That's not like you don't go home at night being like, oh, great, I made my dials, I sent my emails, I made, you didn't accomplish the goal, so it's not working for you. You got to get it to work for you, and you just work your way down in your funnel. It's like if you don't get your PG working for you, you got to get your PG working for you. Once you've got your PG working for you, then it's a question of the actual buying process. And I think that for people that still understand how to build pipeline and are taking accountability for building pipeline, I think that's the biggest thing that people have to consciously remind themselves is that the buying process has changed, right? The person who is telling you on the other end of the phone, oh yeah, my authority is up to $50,000 or $100,000 or $500,000. I actually had a customer say this the other day. Oh yeah, we don't have to go to RFP as long as it's under $500,000. Like that might have been true a year ago, and you might think it's still true now. But when was the last time you bought something that was six figures but under $500,000? Oh well, that was probably last year. Okay, well, hey, do me and you both a favor, and let's go double check that that is still true, right? And so I think you know, a lot of the answer here is you sometimes sort of gloss over the details because things were working, right? Like requalifying the economic buyer and requalifying where you are in the decision process and requalifying what the compelling event is. Those aren't things that you're doing when you're closing 75% of your pipeline successfully, right? But as soon as all of a sudden you're not closing 75% of your pipeline successfully, all of a sudden if you ask yourself, did I really get to the, five or six people that are really involved in this process, or did I just rely on one champion I thought I built? Did I really requalify exactly how this decision is going to get made? Did I really make sure that it's priority one for the buyer, not two or three, but priority one? Did I really understand what they're going to not spend money on because they're going to spend money on this? I think like you kind of go through that whole list of sort of sales 101 things, and you get back to the basics, and you find that usually that's where your problem lies, is that you've just gotten comfortable with the fact that it was a little bit easier when everybody's doing well.
So you have to get that skepticism back and start being a bit more paranoid. I think the paranoid salesperson's always the one that tends to do well.
Yeah, one of the best sales reps that I ever had on my team, uh, every time he talked about a deal, he would always start with, "I don't have a purchase order yet because of these risks." And it's like that's what made him such a good seller, is he was always just thinking about a deal like de-risking, right? It's like if there were no risks, I would have a purchase order on my desk right now. Yeah. And I think sometimes people get comfortable in the customer telling them about a process and then saying, well, oh, I don't have a purchase order because I'm at this stage in the process. And the customer says I have to go through these other stages in the process. And the process might be true, but that doesn't mean that your work as the seller is done. There's always that next advocate that you can build in the company. There's always that next part of the business case that you can build. There's always that next interesting new tool that they're going to hear about tomorrow that's going to compete for shared budget with you, even if it doesn't directly compete with you, right? So, like you said, it's the paranoia. Got to be like 10x.
Yeah. Well, listen, Yotam, it's been. I think in terms of timings, we've timed this pretty well, and I think for all the sales leaders out there now that are finding themselves in a bit of a hole towards their quarterly number, there's some sound advice there. Strip it back, get to basics, and don't get complacent. Start being a bit more skeptical and focusing on all the sort of minute details that can go wrong and being aware of the risks. I think that's a really great place
Oh,
to end the
yeah.
go
Well, I
on.
want to add two other things, just as we sort of think about it for that audience, is that one is um, it's never, things are when things are good, they're never as good as you think they are, and when things are bad, they're never as bad as you think they are. And I think that's, I think for me, that's always been a motto. Like I've been criticized at times in my career, fairly criticized, that I don't celebrate the wins enough, but I also don't let myself get beat up, or I don't beat others up off the losses as much either, because it's just like it just does you no good. What I'm doing with my hands is sort of like a pendulum, right? I try not to let the pendulum swing too much in one direction or the other. And I've just found that for me, that's always helped me work through stressful times the most. And the best is to just tell yourself it's not as bad as you think it is, and it's also when it's going to be good again, it's never going to be as good as you think it is. So that's one thing I wanted to say in closing, and then the other is um, when times are hard in terms of pipeline and quota attainment, you got to just get back to your best customers. And you have to be able to pick up the phone or go out to a meal or get on a Zoom with your best customers and ask them for their advice about what they would do if they were in your shoes. And I've done that more times than I can probably count in my career. And every time I've been pleasantly surprised by what I hear, both in terms of ideas about what I haven't thought about doing or haven't done, offers and opportunities where they're willing to go speak at a dinner that I host, um, you know, uh, a friend they know that actually might be an interesting lead for us. There's like so many, or even, hey, a way to position the product. Maybe they think that there's a positioning opportunity around the product that's different, that's not being talked about. So you'll be pleasantly surprised by what you hear when you're willing to just sort of openly tell your customer, "Hey, we're struggling a little bit, and I would love your advice."
Yeah, I know. I think it's two really good points to end on. The emotional intelligence, like you're saying, is like not letting the pendulum swing too far either way. Is that ability to regulate your emotions? Don't get me wrong, celebrate when things are going well, but don't beat yourself up horrendously when things aren't. And speaking to your customers. And I think that's something that I love so much about recruiting in this market is we deal with salespeople and sales leaders who get it, particularly when it comes to the ups and downs of sales. And also it's like in our innate nature to help and want to support other people in sales. So it's definitely something that resonates with me about reaching out to customers for advice. How would you deal with this? And I can definitely say something that's done me well within my career. I suppose, yeah, to bring things to a bit of a light-hearted close. I always like to sort of ask a couple of little curveball questions just to sort of see who the real Yotam is. So I think
These have
one
all
of the
been
first.
curveballs, by the way. These have all been curveballs because I neglected to read the prompt questions ahead of time.
Well, well, failed to prepare, Yotam. Um, so one of the questions I want to ask: do you love to win or do you hate to lose?
um, yeah, definitely more of a hate to lose.
Why?
Uh, I think whenever I win at something, it just never like it always feels like, okay, let's go do that again, as opposed to like I just never give myself the time to celebrate the win really. Um, you know, and but the hate to lose, I say that just because, yeah, I can still tell you about deals I've lost in my career 12, 15 years ago. I can tell you about the wins too, but I only talk about the wins to maybe teach a point to somebody about, hey, here's what good looks like. But the hate to lose, like you get emotionally, like sort of visceral reaction from me when I talk about something about, a loss.
The fear of loss is always greater, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And tell me if we've you've worked in sales for a long time. I've worked in sales for a long time. I know salespeople can earn themselves a bit of a reputation in terms of the characters. So when it comes to like work hard, play hard. So I'm sure you've seen a lot over the years: sales kickoffs, presidents clubs. I want you to tell me a funny story of President's Club or a sales kickoff that you think the listeners might enjoy hearing to wrap things up.
Oof. I'm just making this face because I got to think about something I won't get in trouble for sharing. um, Man, is there something we can talk about? I think I'm going to have to say no comment on it. I really don't know if I have a
Yeah,
good
that's
story without getting in trouble.
fair enough. All right. What's the ideal day off for you then?
So I've got 3 young kids, and so if you're going to tell me my ideal day off, I'm seeing them in the morning, taking them to we got a good spot up here called Silver Diner. We go take them to the diner so they can have their eggs and French fries in the morning with their milkshake. Going to play a round of golf where I'm most likely going to shoot over 100, and then I'm going to come home. The Cowboys will be on beating the Giants or the Eagles in a game of football. We'll go eat a steak with a nice bottle of red wine, and we'll go to sleep.
Nice. Well, you sign me up for that. Well, listen, Yotam, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. There's so much value that people can take from the conversation that we've had today. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know you've got a lot on your plate with Auto at the minute. So yeah, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, and I'm a big fan of what you guys do. I think you guys do a great job. I say that to people even if I'm not on a recorded line. So,
Yeah,
what you're doing. Thanks for having me.
thanks a lot. Cheers. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you want more information about the podcast, head over to our website, Scale with Strive.